In the first video in this series recommending lesser-known TV shows, I talked about how people don't really take the medium of television seriously enough to venture back beyond the past few decades, with the exception perhaps of a few major classics. And there's maybe no better evidence of this than the first show I want to talk about today. We all know that Twin Peaks was massive, and it's still recognized to this day as one of the greatest achievements in the medium. And yet I don't think I've ever heard anyone mention the show that both Mark Frost and David Lynch, the co-creators of Twin Peaks, made only a year after Twin Peaks' cancellation. A little sitcom, if you can call it that lasted only 7 episodes, only 3 of which actually aired in the US, called On the Air. It feels strange to describe a David Lynch work as strange, because of course we expect Lynch's work to be strange, but what's strange about On the Air is that it's not really strange in the same way Lynch's work is usually strange. Its particular kind of strangeness is strange. Maybe because this is an outright comedy. We're used to Lynch's surrealism being combined with darker themes and subject matter, like in Twin Peaks, for example. But here Lynch's absurdist tendencies exist purely in service of comedy and satire. And this show is a satire of, well, just television in general, really. This is a TV series that has the courage to say, television is dumb, and watching television probably makes you dumber. It's about the chaotic production of a 1950s variety show, The Lester Guy Show, which always goes catastrophically wrong. It's essentially a Lynchian 30 Rock, and it almost feels like it was written by Marshall McLuhan because of how it deconstructs the medium of television, taking apart the fundamental aspects of broadcasting. In fact, when The Lester Guy Show goes live each episode, we often get shots of people in their homes watching. I love how Lynch approaches the theme of communication in the opening sequence of the first episode. Not just communication between characters, but communication with the audience. The first scene almost seems like a surreal parody of bad exposition. So right from the get-go, it feels like we're commenting on how a televisual narrative is put together.
Ruthie, this is live television.
Betty, you're the co-star of the show. You have absolutely no experience whatsoever. You have every right to be extremely apprehensive.
Where am I?
And then we're introduced to the show's director, whose job it is to communicate to his crew, but who can only make himself understood through his assistant because of his strange, virtually unintelligible accent.
Sir, when would you like me to rehearse the kitchen scene?
How is your name? Your earring.
How is your earring?
Betty, how is your ironing?
Patty, can you scram?
You want me to leave?
Can you scram?
Can you swim?
Betty, Mr. Gotcha is asking if you're able to scream.
Scram! Scram! Ah!
Watching this show feels like being inside a television. And while it may just seem like a wacky, absurdist comedy on the surface, as with everything Lynch makes, there's plenty of depth to this series, plenty of things to unpack. And so I would definitely recommend checking out the first episode at the very least, which I'd argue is the peak of the series, although the entire thing is certainly worth watching.
Blinky Watts is not blind. He suffers from Bozeman simplex. He actually sees 25.62 times as much as we do. If we were to see what Blinky is seeing right now, it would look something like this.
Following in the spirit of media satires directed by well-established filmmakers, let's move on to Tanner 88, directed by the great Robert Altman and written by Gary Trudeau. Here we're dealing more specifically with notions of public image, politics, authenticity in the media age, and as always, Altman emphasizes that sort of carnivalesque, polyphonic style. He has his ensemble cast, and his camera is always gliding across a time and place, a community, a culture. We get a holistic vision of this world, this political world, with the presidential campaign of the fictional congressman Jack Tanner serving as the through line. But the most brilliant aspect of this series is the constant interplay between reality and fiction, and the emphasis placed on the media as a general entity, but also the specific mediums of transmission of that media. And we can see this in the opening scenes of the first episode. We start with Tanner doing a TV interview, and we first see him through the cameras. Then we see his campaign team critiquing a proposal for the campaign video that's supposed to sell the candidate, basically. And then when we finally actually get a real scene with him away from the cameras and monitors, he's visiting people, and when they tell him and his daughter that they sent the camera crews away before they arrived, their first reaction is this.
Oh, those minicam people are the worst. I've seen Holsteins with better manners. I had to threaten to sue NBC when one of them trucks tore up my lawn.
Oh,
Is that
dear.
right?
Yes.
Oh, dear.
You're not expecting anybody else.
Yes, we are. WMUR. We're sending over a TV crew to...
I sent him away. You got to try to be here on time.
Send them away. How do you send them away?
Well,
We have to call them. We have to get them back. That's right.
yeah.
And then the first episode culminates in this brilliant sequence where the campaign filmmaker, who's been going around with his camera filming people all day, happens to capture a genuine off-the-cuff speech Tanner gives to his team, which of course they then turn into his campaign video. After following him around all day, seeing different perspectives on his character, his identity, trying to understand what he really wants, what he really represents, we feel like we've finally got a glimpse of his true beliefs, his true character. But of course, this isn't a documentary, this is also fiction, so there's a layering of the fiction happening here, and of course this video is being used to ameliorate his public image, so there's no escaping the media, the fragmentation of identity, and having it all filmed through a glass table is just genius, emphasizing that layering of reality, another layer of glass on top of the camera lens and the screens on which it will be shown. In fact, screens, glass, mirrors, these are all recurring visual motifs in the series. Altman creates this fascinating texture, and when you add all this to the fact that parts of the series were improvised, you end up with a film where you never know what's real, what's fictional, what was planned, and what was found art, as Altman himself put it.
When we saw you in that famous coffee table shot, it was very clear that you felt very strongly about what you were talking about. You were mad at yourself, you were mad at her, you were mad at everybody.
Also
and
allowed
you,
them to
and you didn't know
exploit
you
me
were on
with
camera.
that shot, exactly.
You weren't exploited with that shot.
I don't know. I've never been very comfortable with that whole thing.
Oh, but Jack, you were
And then I
great.
allowed you people to exploit me there.
You should have promoted her for that.
Well, there's only one.
But there's something about it that I find very difficult to look at. I mean, I really do.
Said I react to the spontaneous, which is a problem because that's the very thing you see as exploitation. I would much rather see something real happen, not a make-believe real thing, but, you know, yawning and scratching your belly.
Muskie crying in front of a
Just-
newspaper? The
Well,
biggest
not
idiocy
too real.
is the guy who says we don't need another actor like Reagan. You should be so lucky as we will put you forward as another actor so long as you're an actor like Roosevelt.
Filthy Rich and Cat Flap is without a doubt one of the most baffling British comedy series ever produced. It's the second sitcom collaboration between writer Ben Elton, one of the leading voices in the British alternative comedy scene in the 80s, and performers Rick Mayall and Adrian Edmondson, who would then go on to make one of my favourite sitcoms together, Bottom. But their first collaboration was the smash hit The Young Ones, and to be honest, you could easily argue that The Young Ones and Bottom are better shows, but Filthy Rich and Cat Flap is, well, first of all, it was nowhere near as popular, so it makes for a better entry in a recommendation video, but it's also much more chaotic, which is really saying something because Bottom and The Young Ones are two of the most insane sitcoms ever made. In fact, those shows are all about breaking down sitcom conventions. Quite literally, actually. One of the crew's favourite gags seems to be repeatedly destroying the sets and props. But whereas Bottom episodes feel like these tightly constructed plays, Filthy Rich and Catflap is all over the place. It's hard to really figure out what kind of show it's trying to be. Is it an odd couple sitcom like Bottom would later become? Is it a showbiz satire? A fourth wall breaking meta comedy? Well, it's all of these things really, and that's what makes this show so interesting to me. There really is nothing else like it. Just to give you an idea, the first episode features the main character accidentally killing about half a dozen milkmen. The best way to describe this show is that it feels like what you'd get if everyone involved in the production of a sitcom got really, really drunk and entered into some kind of collective delirium.
Hi, God bless, drive safely, look after Mum. Richie Rich here, some dates still available. Bastards. My bloody dad's getting better.
Well, it was nice to be rich for 36. Well, sounds a bit rude. Sounds a bit like sex. Well, sounds exactly like sex.
Oh, shut up. Filthy, I can't return to Paul.
Well, you don't have to, do you?
How do you mean?
Well, you could always kill him.
Kill my own father to get on an advert.
Why not?
Yeah, why not?
Well, because... Well, there aren't really any reasons why not, are there?
I'd be hard-pressed to call The Larry Sanders Show underrated. I mean, this was one of the most acclaimed comedy series on TV while it was airing, and it really raised the bar for HBO's original programming in the 90s, but I think it's still worth recommending as I don't see many people talking about it anymore these days. The Larry Sanders Show is a look behind the scenes of a late-night comedy talk show in the vein of The Tonight Show. And Gary Shandling was actually a regular guest and guest host on The Tonight Show, and after Jay Leno took over from Carson, the network even offered Shandling his own 1 a.m. time slot. But he preferred instead to create a show about that kind of show. And it's a good thing he did because The Larry Sanders Show is one of the greatest sitcoms of all time. And it's interesting when compared to Gary Shandling's previous show, It's Gary Shandling's Show, which presented itself as a rather conventional sitcom but constantly broke the fourth wall. Whereas here, the subject matter is sort of meta in that it's showing the inner workings of a TV show and the life of its comedian host, whose character is obviously very close to Gary Shandling's own real persona, but the execution of that premise is much more naturalistic. There's a kind of mellow realism to this show. It was definitely a pretty innovative series as well, with these semi-serialized arcs that, to me, are reminiscent of some of the things Larry David would go on to do with Curb Your Enthusiasm. And I can imagine how refreshing this show must have been in a landscape of much more conventional network sitcoms of the time. But what I really love about this show is that it doesn't insist upon itself. It never begs for laughs, it's never too broad, but it's full of these brilliantly sharp lines and character beats. It's generally a fairly quiet, subtle comedy, but it really is one of the best, so if you haven't seen it already, go watch it.
Okay, Hank, I'm sorry. You can have
No,
me
in
more.
fact, why don't you just laugh in my face? I mean, you might as well do it now. You and Artie do it every time I turn my back.
That is not true, Hank.
She was half the judge! Now there's just one of them! So she is a judge! She is a single judge!
Mother was ill.
What about the time I chipped my tooth on the bathroom urinal? Huh? What the fuck is so comical about that?
It was a back tooth, Hank. I don't know how you did it.
Strangers with Candy is a black comedy series from 1999 created by Paul Dinello, Mitch Rouse, Stephen Colbert, and Amy Sedaris, who stars as a former drug addict who returns to high school in her 40s. This character is actually partly based on the motivational speaker Florrie Fisher, who would travel around high schools in the 60s and 70s talking about her past experiences with drugs and prostitution. And the show as a whole is a kind of parody of after-school specials and sitcoms like The Brady Bunch that have these episodic stories constructed around simple morals and easy plot resolutions. But in Strangers with Candy, Amy Sedaris' character always does the wrong thing, and those morals end up subverted in one way or another.
Well, with the the exception of Shelley and Poppy Downs, everything turned out to be pretty okay. They never did find out who killed Poppy, so I guess justice was served. I also realized that this second time through high school, I'm a little bit wiser. Oh, I'm still doing the wrong things, but at least I'm doing them the right way.
The show can, at times, feel a bit like an extended SNL skit, but there's definitely enough laughs and ridiculous plot developments throughout to keep you invested, so it's definitely worth a watch. This is up there as one of the best black comedies of the past few decades.
Where were you? What? I'll repeat the question. What took you so long?
I was getting...
Don't lie to me, Tammy. I saw you right over there talking to Jimmy Goosey.
I just said hi.
Oh, really? Is that how they say hi in Horville?
Jerry, I don't want to have lunch. I'm just going to take Diz and go for a walk.
Yeah. You're taking my child nowhere.
Seeing as I started this video with On the Air, how about we finish off with a TV show that genuinely gives Lynch a run for his money in terms of surrealist entertainment, and that is Unwind with the Sweeties. If I was aware of this show when I made my Fever Dream TV shows video, I definitely would have included it there because Unwind with the Sweeties is without a doubt one of the most unique uses of the medium out there. And I wouldn't even be able to recommend this show if it wasn't for the fact that the creators have started uploading clips and full episodes to their YouTube channel. Because this was a public access show broadcast in the early 90s. It's basically a sort of surreal video podcast, and there's not really that much more I can say about it that wouldn't be better served by just showing you a clip. So here it is.
Oh, sweetie. See, there's that breathing part. Hear that breathing part? Oh, sweetie. Oh. Okay, that does it. That does it, sweetie.
Okay, I didn't know. I won't do it. Okay.
Scary monster.
I'll stop.
Sweetie.
I'll stop. I promise.
Sweetie, I'm
I'll stop.
scary
I'll
monster.
stop.
Oh.